Magavanen, welcome back to my channel. YouTubers are doing something called With Me or Stay Home. For those of you that are at home and, like me, have to stay in because of the virus, I thought that this would be a great way to share our time together. And I wanted to talk about how to make a fairy terrarium. Uh, Terrariums have basically been something that have been used for a while now. And I have a very brief introduction of where they started from, because there actually was somebody who invented the first terrarium. And it says here that as early as 500 BC, plants were kept under bell-shaped glass jars for exhibit. But the terrarium in its modern form was invented by accident in 1827 by Nathaniel Ward, a London doctor. The fern case was discovered accidentally in 1827 by Dr. Nathaniel Ward, a London physician with a passion for botany. Dr. Ward built a fern rockery in his backyard, but the ferns kept dying, poisoned by the fumes from the city's factories. Ward was also studying moths and caterpillars, and while experimenting with a cocoon in a covered jar for observation, he noticed that several plants had grown in the bit of soil at the bottom of the jar. Among the bottled plants was a fern, and unlike the ferns in his garden, it looked healthy. Dr. Ward concluded that plants could flourish in London if they could be protected from the city's polluted air. Ward pursued his discovery in miniature greenhouses, which he named fern cases, and which are now known as Wardian cases or terrariums. And I call it a fairy terrarium because I'm actually going to put some fairy decor so that I can give my fairies a home to stay in when they come and visit. So those that have elven souls or really resonate with the fairies, they may want to turn their terrarium into a fairy home, and you can actually have both. So we're going to make one together. I have a kit that I have from Amazon, which I'm going to review. But before I started, I wanted to give this short introduction from Brian Froud. He put this as a foreword, and I thought this was really beautiful. I wanted to read this about Faerie. We say by way of because there really is no introduction to the world of Faerie. That is, no one can introduce you to fairies. This is an old-fashioned idea, probably rooted in the wealth of questionable fiction about these ambiguous creatures. The fact is, they will either accept you or as a part of their world, or they won't. It's up to them. Sometimes, indeed, a totally unwilling human will nevertheless become captive, or i.e. captivated, taken by Faerie for their own purposes. Sometimes no amount of mooning around in misty forest glades or communion with nature at the bottom of the garden, erroneously said to be a favorite haunt of fairies, will bring about anything other than a general sense of damp. Our own personal experience with fairies is complicated. This is necessarily so with creatures of such varied and ever-changing character. In an effort to bring some order, at least, to a controversial subject, we have explored legend, myth, folklore, fairy lore, and even outright fantasy. It has been necessary to sift through the mass of material thus accumulated to practice dimensions. Our book, therefore, is divided up into various categories of fairy, where possible, and into various categories of fairy experience. And here we must make one thing very clear. The real fairy experience is very different from the general view of fairy built up by clouds of sentimental fiction with legions of inevitable, happily ever after endings. The world of once upon a time, delightful as it is and highly as we value it, is not the real world of fairy. Fairy represents power, magical power, incomprehensible to humans, and hence inimical. It must always be remembered that though the world of fairy is to a large extent dependent on humans, fairies are alien creatures with values and ethics far removed from mankind. They do not think, and most notably, they do not feel the way that humans do. This is precisely the core of much of their envy of mortals, and the source of a good deal of the trouble they cause. For fairies are themselves creatures of the raw stuff of life, and are ceaselessly attracted to all forms of creativity, and particularly to moments of high emotion in which they seek to be participants, lovers, poets, artists, writers, sculptors, weavers, musicians, and the like. All the arts indeed acknowledge a debt to an unidentifiable, invisible, capricious, sensitive, delicate, elusive, and powerful force, which is called inspiration or muse, and it's generally irresistible when present. It is no coincidence that these are also the chief characteristics of Faerie. Hence, Faerie should be held as infinitely valuable. Faerie is a world of dark enchantments, of captivating beauty, of enormous ugliness, of callous superficiality, of humor, mischief, joy, inspiration, generosity, of terror, laughter, love, and tragedy. It is far richer than fiction would generally lead one to believe, and beyond that, it is a world to enter with extreme caution. For of all things that fairies resent the most, it is curious humans blundering about their private domains like so many ill-mannered tourists. So go softly, where the rewards are enchanting, the dangers are real. But the time is getting short for the taking of such delicious risks. Fairy contact with humans, dependent as it is on the natural world of humans, is shrinking with our own shrinking habitat. It is time and beyond to distinguish the accumulated superstitions and conjectural fictions about fairy form from its reality, to study the world of fairy with, we hope, kindly objectivity and a proper enjoyment of its truer value to a man. To man. This is by Betty Ballentine, and this was the foreword that Brian Frow decided to put in the book, and I thought that was perfect to describe Faerie. One of the things that I really loved that she talked about is how fairies as creatures, or these other dimensional beings, they started to not really exist in our world as humans took over their habitats and started, it says blundering about, carelessly, not caring about the trees or the plants or the flowers that they step all over or they cut down. And so the fairies retreated further back into their own dimension so that they're not able to be seen. So one of the ways that you can bring fairy energy back into this world is by building a fairy house or a fairy terrarium. And I wanted to show you, this is my fairy house I made. That it would be a good time to show you. So this is one that I constructed for my wedding. I wanted to have it at a table where people would sign the guest books, because my wedding was very much a fairy tale and kind of inspired wedding, but also it had some Lord of the Rings, like people could sit in Rivendell table or the Lothlorien table. And this was at the guest book table. So I created it. And if you can see, it's just very delicate with like little stairs to go up on top here. I put a lot of crystals. I made a little crystal gate. I really went overboard. I have like a little crystal ball at the top here. And I have this like wooden angel here, sculpture. And when you turn it to the back, I created this shell water fountain attached to a crystal part here. I used a moss landing with some mushrooms. I have some bottles that fell over. This thing is not glued. I didn't want to glue it in case I wanted to change it. I have a little window and some little fairy bottles, very tiny little vials of crystals that I received as gifts from friends. And this is my little fairy house that I made. So one day, maybe I'll make a fairy house with you all and show you how to construct something of your own. But today is going to be all about the terrariums. And terrarium is basically a living greenhouse in your home. So it's going to grow, and it's a way to have it in a glass container like this. This is one that I bought many years ago, but you can find them very easily anywhere, really. I particularly love the shape of this one, so I'm going to keep on using it. And I bought this kit from Amazon. I have all of the stuff I need. I also have some little fairy decorations here. These are actually glow-in-the-dark mushrooms, and a little fairy clay house, and a little lantern. So these are just some of the things that I will be using today, and then you can add as you go. And I also will be using an air plant to put inside. This is actually called a Faerie air plant from eBay. You can actually find it, and it actually is named Faerie air plant because it's dyed at the roots with vegetable dye, so it's not bad for the plant at all. It just colors it. Okay, so let's begin. So it gives you all of the directions that you're going to need, and I'm going to shift you down here so you can watch what I'm doing. What you want to have is you probably want to have some water with you because you're going to need water. This is going to spray it and basically create a dampness that you're going to need. I also have a 1/4 cup of water, which I will be using. The thing about terrariums is that it's not just a bunch of rocks and dirt kind of carelessly placed. You want to make sure that you do place it in a way to mimic the earth. So the reason why you actually are going to put the rocks first is that, like earth, there's always, the rocks are the foundation. It's the core of the planet. And then it's the soft soil and the earth that goes on top of the crust. So we're going to mimic these layers of earth with rocks instead of having huge slabs of land that basically created our planet when it cooled after the explosion from the Big Bang and all the elements. After it cooled, then you have the rocks. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pull everything out of your jar that you get, and then you're going to add rocks. Oh, I should probably have a funnel here. Okay, I can also do it through this way too. That would probably be better. So you're going to have the bottom. That is my earth core. Okay, and then I'm going to pour the coconut growth that they're giving. You might use regular soil that you can obtain on your own from the earth. Go outside and you can find it. But just to make sure, because I live in the city and so it's kind of hard to find fertile ground here. This was a kit that is really nice where, you know, it's kind of pre-picked and everything. So I wanted to try it out. And so this is kind of my Amazon review at the same time. So now what you're going to do is you're going to pour the soil on top. And just like that. And I'm going to use a little spoon here to level everything out. And we can add some crystals as well later, but we're going to make this first our level here. And there's just a little bit more. And then sprinkle on seeds. So they give you these grass seeds. And I'm going to sprinkle on seeds. There's not many, but I'm just going to sprinkle them randomly. go. And then you're going to pour the carbon. So you might need activated carbon. It's not like you just are going to be able to put regular soil with rocks that you get outside, but you also might want to use activated carbon as well. So you're going to pour that evenly over the seeds now. I'm going to get scissors here. And then I'm going to use my spoon and mix it. This is so fun. It's like playing in a sandbox for adults. I love making these. I do one every year. I've had my last one for about 2 years and it was getting kind of old. So I took it apart and I said, you know what? I'm going to make a new one for the spring. And then I'm going to tilt the terrarium and slowly pour the water in along the side. So now I might want to start to close this little door. And then it says here, you're going to, you don't want to disturb the growth of the medium. So actually I'll probably stick it this way. It might be easier. And it says, tilt the terrarium and slowly pour in along the sides. So along the sides. So not the center, but the sides will be better. There you go. I did not disturb the growth. Good. Okay. Now, okay. So now basically we're pretty much done here. Now what you're going to do is place it in a sunny window, and then you allow it to basically start to get a little bit of growth. And then it says the seeds will sprout in 7 to 21 days. When sprouts are 1 inch tall, you can then add the moss around them to complete your terrarium. So you want to wait until about 1 inch growth of the grass, and then you can add the moss. So just for looks today, I'm just going to add the moss. I'm going to show you how I'm going to create the little houses on top, and then I'll remove the moss when I'm done so that I can get some grass. So then you take the Spanish moss that they give you, which normally is something that's used in terrariums just because it looks so beautiful. It's just so green. You could find Spanish moss pretty easily online, or even at stores like Michael's, you can find it. I also really like the spongy type, which I got at Michael's, like all this. I don't know if you could see. Oh, here we go. It's like this really spongy green, and then you have kind of this beige color, and then that's the spongy type. And you get that from Michael's. This is actually artificial. Oh, that's artificial. And I just used this just for my wedding, just to ensure that it wasn't going to dry out or anything like that. Oh, one thing I wanted to tell you all, I actually have about 20 of these that I sell on my Etsy store. Oh, here we go. I sell these on my Etsy store, just this wood here. And then I also have some moss and they're leftovers from my wedding. So if you ever want to create your own like that, then go to my Etsy store and I'll send you one, because I have a box of 20 still, and I didn't really know exactly what to do with them. So I thought that, you know, people can make their own little fairy homes if they wanted to. So you can go to my Etsy store, go to the About, and then you'll see the Modern Elf store. And then that will take you to the link to my store. All right, so let me show you what it looks like so far. So you could see I have the rocks on the bottom, pretty even. I could have done better here, but that's just my moon in Virgo speaking. Okay, so that's kind of how it's going to look. Now, let's do the fun part here. This is always a joy. So what you want to do is you get your decorations that you truly, want to use. And you're just going to, oh, you know what? Let me do this before I start. So just do a little spritz of the Spanish moss, and this kind of starts the growth. Although I'm going to take off the Spanish moss so I can get a little bit more grass growing, I'm just wetting it down for now. Okay, and then you're just going to start placing your homes where you want, where you think the fairies would love to be. And these are nice because they have the little stakes in them, so that always helps. And I'm just kind of sticking them wherever. I love this little fairy lantern. And you can get as creative as you want with this. You could really get nice and creative. I'm actually going to use an Elven Star stone that I painted with our Elven Spiritual Path symbol now. And I'm just going to place it right there as like a little platform for my fairies, maybe like a little ritual area where they can congregate. This is a very tiny little fairy town, by the way. Like, you can actually go a lot bigger than this, but I thought this would be a good size. And then these are the glow-in-dark mushrooms. And I will stick them in certain areas. And hopefully you guys can see. There you go. And there are so many adorable and cute little fairy decorations that you can find on Etsy. This is one of them that I was able to find. Now, you can make this yourself, but I just did not have the patience to do it. Somebody did, and it is just absolutely beautiful. It's just like a little staircase that brings the fairies up on the roof to watch the stars or the sun. And it's just really a gorgeous little accessory to add, but you can find so many fun little things everywhere. And then I'm going to add these little big ones. Actually, I'm going to keep these big ones out. How about that? This year, I'm just going to do the little ones. Let's make it all to size. And then I'm just kind of sticking randomly, but I like the little lanterns by the actual houses. And the little lanterns are very cute. They're little crystal beads. And I think I'm almost done here. Now, you can always add more Spanish moss, and you can do a lot more with it as far as the dirt. But this is pretty good as far as, I think, the level. I mean, as far as when the grass starts growing, then it's going to be a little bit higher up. I could also move it so that it could sit on a hill, but for now, this is nice. And then you just place it in your window, and then you'll have grass that will grow. So that's my little fairy. It's just 2 homes, but it's like a little fairy village, and they'll be happy there. And this is a way to, just give a sacred space to the fairies. Now, what you can do is you can add an air plant. Maybe I'll do that right in the center. And then voila, my fairy terrarium is complete. Don't forget to water your air plant. Now, air plants are great because they don't have to be in a pot, and they don't have to actually be immersed in water or soil, but you do have to spray them every now and then so that they don't dry out. So there you have it. I did it. So I hope that you found this educational and also inspiring, so that you can make your own fairy terrarium. And invite the fairies to come stay with you by keeping the door open. But it's also nice because I have a little opening here. So there you have it. It's all set and ready for spring. It's a good time to celebrate the spring equinox, which, by the way, Tolkien's new year celebration is the birth of flowers, and that will be happening next week. So I will post that for you all so you can join us in our video about talking about the Elven New Year. And I hope you all stay safe and are enjoying your time inside. For me, it was a really interesting day because on the spring equinox, I was very busy outside, but I was also trying to clean up my storage room that has just so many different things that I never even am using anymore. And I also like to keep boxes in case of moving. So I had to break all those boxes down and recycle them. And so I got a lot done yesterday. In the spirit of rebirth, I have a cleaner home. So that was kind of exciting there. But the links are in the description if you're interested in the Amazon Terrarium kit. I think it's pretty good. We'll see how the grass grows. I will definitely post a picture of the growth on my Instagram account. So if you are not following me, you can follow me on Hi Elven Wisdom and Love on Instagram, and you could see the growth of it. So everyone, I hope you enjoy your time at home while you are staying safe and also keeping others safe while we wait for the virus to pass. And we will see some new changes to Earth, I am sure, and just in time for rebirth of spring, right? So Hen and Lei for joining me today, and I will see you all on the next video. Take care.